Yo guys, welcome to the video. This is Josh or Milky, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Flicker Strike and Falling Thunder builds that I've been doing. This is probably going to be one of the final updates to both of the builds, as you know, there's probably a big balance patch approaching, and we're doing all kind of Herald shenanigans, and everyone knows how overpowered these quarterstaff monks are. So let's go over exactly what I'm doing in case you want to continue your build and get to the point that I'm at. Definitely made some adjustments. We're going to start with Flicker. I will timestamp where the Falling Thunder section is. I'm probably going to repeat myself a lot, so instead of making this 2 videos, I'm just going to put the Falling Thunder stuff at the end, Flicker stuff at the beginning. So jump to that if you want to go watch that. I'll see you there. If you want to watch the Flicker stuff, let's get into it. So obviously we'll start with the weapon. We have made a big change, and that is to an elemental damage weapon. This isn't necessarily mandatory by any means. The old version definitely still works, you can see, but the main reason I did this, I've been saying this from the beginning, use the best weapon you've got, use the best DPS weapon you've got. So we can see if I put on this one, I'm at 47, this is a Fizz Cold, this is my old one, and this one takes us up to 50. But even then, it's not just because it's elemental. Of course, this staff here gives you up to 61, even better. So it's just using the best staff you've got. This one did teach me a few lessons, though, that I definitely needed to learn, especially after adding on these gloves, which are the Hand of Wisdom and Action. You've probably seen these, they're very popular. Add a ton of flat damage, add a nice amount of attack speed, even with stats like mine, 170, 240. It's more than worth using them. They're just a ton of damage. You can see they're giving me an enormous amount of damage, actually. Almost 50%, well, more than 50% more damage. So yeah, the gloves are exceptionally good. And then the other thing that you're probably spotting is the helmet. We'll get into that in a second. But what did this weapon teach me? Well, I definitely undervalued it, especially considering once we put these gloves on, we get a ton more flat damage. I'm getting flat damage from my rings that is then getting scaled by my belt. So why add more flat damage on the weapon? Well, first of all, we have to. There's not that many mods in the prefixes for a weapon. But we can, at least instead of one of them, get a massive elemental damage with a tax roll. And I'd say this is true for both builds we're going to talk about today. But Wed, yeah, Wed is exceptional, and especially if you've got one like this, because what happens for Flicker Strike is that the skill doesn't actually convert any of your damage. It just deals damage based on the added damage you have. And if we're using a crackling staff with elemental damage, we have elemental damage from our rings, our gloves, it's going to deal entirely elemental damage, which means we're actually going to get benefit from Sunder My Enemies on Flicker. Previously, we've kind of been using Flicker as a pseudo damage skill, but it's also just been kind of propagating our charged staff and our heralds. Now it does a pretty decent chunk of damage itself, which is very, very nice. It's certainly not doing as much damage as it could do if you fully spec'd into like a lightning version of Flicker. But yeah, this is more than enough, and it absolutely destroys maps. And if you get it right, it can really annihilate bosses too. Now, the helmet is the next thing we'll talk about. This helmet has been on my radar for a while, but for some reason I never equipped it. And someone in chat today of updates just asked me if I tried it, and I said no. And then I realized that the penny finally dropped. This helmet is very, very, very good for us. As someone that has been so stubborn against going CI for not really much of a reason other than I'd already built life gear, this helmet was an absolute diamond. Look at it. It gives us 30% of our life as extra maximum energy shield. It does give us a damage split of damage being dealt to life and DS. Gives us rarity, and it gives us a very easy to obtain maximum power charge, which is something we very much like on this build. More flat damage from charged staff, more projectiles on Falling Thunder, and more attacks on our Flicker Strike. So you can watch my ES in the bottom left. It goes from 1700 to 3500, so more than doubles with this helmet. Of course, we're not putting this helmet over no helmet. If we had an ES helmet, we're about 2500. So this helmet represents about a 40% increase, more ES kind of, which is obviously phenomenal. It's great for the build. The reason we want to stack so much ES is having dropped quite a considerable amount of evasion, but the main reason being the stuff that kills you most of the times in maps, it's not mobs hitting you. Yeah, sometimes you're going to get locked in an area with a swarm of mobs around you, but you're pretty much dead at that point anyway. What's going to kill you is those random one-shots. And how do you protect yourself from random one-shots? Well, you either press spacebar or you have a high enough health pool to tank them, because we can't evade them. So we want to increase our energy shield pool by gaining a ton, and then of course this gets doubled. If you've been watching the previous videos, we use Grim Feast, which gives us overflow on our ES. As we kill monsters, we can pick up remnants that give us additional ES stacking up to double. So in maps, we're going to be at 7,000, And we're going to gain an extra 40% increased energy shield when we consume a power charge, which actually ends up just with that 40%, takes me up to something like 7.9k in maps, assuming I've consumed a power charge recently. So you can imagine, very, very comfortable. Now for Flicker Strike, I've also deliberated on going to a rare amulet. The reason being, more often than not, Flicker Strike runs out of mobs to hit before you run out of power charges to spend. So the additional power charges you get from Serpent's Egg aren't really utilized all that well. So using a rare amulet with a massive percent ES roll, as you can see, this gives us a ton of ES, just that 1% roll right there. Gives us a lot of ES. You can see how starved we are in that percentage. It takes us all the way up to 3,500. So again, an amulet like this is very nice. Of course, rarity. I'm not going to get into the specifics of rarity, but rarity, very good. All attributes, Chaos Res, those two mods just giving me back what I lost from taking off this amulet. Anointed with Doomsayer, this is Herald AoE. I'll get into why that's important later, but you've probably seen it doing the rounds. Obviously, everyone using Herald tech. I was halfway there with the Herald of Thunder, but I didn't do the Herald of Ice, so Don the Crown beat me to that. But the Herald of Thunder tech, obviously, we had, and then Don fixed that together to take it even further with the Herald of Ice. So teamwork there between the boys. And then on the rings, we have res, attack damage, all of these being the same element, meaning we can quality them. The same going for the other breach ring. Now, you do need an unset ring in order to fit in the cheeky little support, buff skill that I've added. One of the main problems I felt with this build for a long time is that we were just too slow moving around. So I've made a few changes in order to, one, move faster. You see our move speed is, it's not the fastest, but it's definitely faster. And then I've also added in blink. But in order to do that, we need an additional skill slot that we can only get from an unset ring. So we have that. All these mods getting scaled by our belt. It's not ideal to have an unset ring being scaled by ingenuity because we lose an implicit, but honestly, it is what it is. I don't mind having a ring that implicit says you can blink, right? Our body armor, you do need a decent amount of evasion and energy shield on this endgame setup. I'm rocking 229 spirit right now, and I'm using 225 of that. But if you want to do the full setup, you can absolutely get away with only having 210. And to get that, you would need, I think it's 825 evasion, 330 ES, if my math is correct. Someone will have to check that for me, but I'm pretty sure it's correct. Yeah, and then the rest of it just being, you know, stats. You don't actually need stats. Obviously, stats are very good, though, because you get the extra flat damage, and they let you have a higher level Blink or Grim Feast. And then the rest, res, life, boots, kind of the same. Res, life, move speed, rarity, if you can get it. So the gear has changed quite considerably. For the better, I'd say, in pretty much every slot, which is why I'm willing to make this video and do this update, because if most of the time, if I change something and it's kind of a side grade or it's very marginal, I won't make a video. But this setup, I would say, is absolutely worthy of a video. And yeah, I would recommend following the planner and changing over to this setup. In terms of what we changed on the tree, this is a place where we've got more changes. I know, sorry, big update this time. We have gone with a controlled metamorphosis. This was recommendation from Snoobane. It's something that I was reluctant to do for a long time, as I was kind of nervous about dropping all this evasion and also screwing over my dexterity by losing all these nodes, losing 6% attack speed and 15 dex there. But ultimately, it was, you know, nothing to be worried about. We can absolutely fit this in. And what this jewel does is it gives us more of that stat that we kind of struggling to get on this build, which is move speed. You can see here we get 3%. Also get some of that evasion back that we lost. We get some attack damage here, some attack damage and movement speed here. Movement speed here, as well as reduced slowing potency, which is very nice. And then we keep bestial skin, so we're getting that double evasion rating from our chest piece. And then 25 dex there, which is more than worth it. And then we come in the middle here, grab a jewel. So we still have the same number of jewel slots, so you still want to get like a rage and AoE jewel, the mana on kill, so you don't have to run siphon. If you don't have as much spirit, if you have 210, then you need to run life from death. And in order to run that, you probably have to drop this attack speed up here and come and grab life from death. Because obviously the damage is going through your energy shield to your life with the helmet. So you want to be able to recover your life. And that's the easiest way to do it outside of spamming your flask. If you're willing to spam your flask, absolutely do that. You can save yourself 2 points, but that sounds a bit uncomfortable to me. Did drop one with the river. If you still need the freeze build up, sure. But as I say, the more and more damage you get, the more and more easier it gets to freeze, just because of how the damage is extra works. And then those points saved allow us to come up and grab Inner Faith. Deep Trance, and Shimmering, which is again 3% increased movement speed. It's not the best node in the world. It's a bit like it's basically 1 point for 3% move speed. I'm more than happy to grab that. Move speed, move speed, move speed. That is the one thing I want more of on this build. I could never have enough. Even considering trying to get move speed on all my jewels, maybe even one day do a Dawned with like move speed and some crazy stuff on the jewels. But we'll get to that in the future if it comes around. So I do suspect this build will be getting nerfed. As for the skills, we're rocking our normal Tempest Flurry skills shown on the planner. Make sure you check the planner. The skills shown on the planner are the same supports, but left to right in order of importance. If they're different on the planner, follow the planner because I can't time travel. I say this every video. I can't come back into this video and tell myself to change something. Rage, Practiced Combo, Inspiration, Electrocute, and Neural Overload. Obviously, with this many 6-links now, we are struggling to find support, so I'm trying out Practiced Combo and Culmination on Flicker Strike. Not the best, but honestly, just running out of supports, especially when you use an elemental damage weapon because you can't use any of the physical damage supports on Flicker. So yeah, really, really struggling to find good supports. As for Charged Staff, we have Persistent, Shock Siphon, Primal Armament, Coursing Current, and Rising Tempest. You could definitely put Primal Armament on here instead and find a new support for Charged Staff. But yeah, it's just there's not really much more to put on Charged Staff. It is a lot more flicker damage, but honestly, you're not lacking for flicker damage anyway. And this doesn't show on tooltip, so we'll stick with this for now. But you can absolutely do that if you want more tooltip damage. Temper Spell, we've got Immolate, Potential, Overabundance, Rage Forged, Super Critical. A downside of this build in particular, it's not really in particular, but a downside I guess is that Flicker Strike eats a lot of our Bell supports. We'd want stuff like Conk Effect, Close Combat on our Bell, and we can't do that when we have Flicker because Flicker wants them. But against Pinnacle bosses, you would want to change that. Another contentious point is that I use Martial Tempo on Flicker Strike. This is because I have more than enough damage to do so. Obviously, Martial Tempo does not add any damage to Flicker Strike. It just makes you move, like zip around faster. But for me, that is a big selling point. I just love zipping around faster. I do more than enough damage to kill everything, regardless of whether or not I have Martial Tempo on Tempest Flurry or not. But you can absolutely like put this here, and Primal Armament here and find another support for Charge Staff. That would be perfectly reasonable. Then we have Grim Feast for the overflow of ES. We have Combat Frenzy for the charge generation. Blink, we have linked with Ingenuity and Arcane Tempo. If I find the links, I'll put them in. But right now, I'm not sure what else we put in here. Get the highest level Blink you can based on your energy shield. I actually need to level mine up a bit. And I'll be able to reduce the cooldown. You can also get, like, on your blue jewel, you can get some CDR. Wind Dancer, we have linked to Pin and Lockdown and Wind Wave. Herald of Ice, this is where some magic is. If you haven't seen this yet, what's happening here is we are making our Herald of Ice deal lightning damage and then using it to shock enemies. And then that also procs our Innovate when it kills a shocked enemy. And then with Herald of Thunder, we're making it deal cold damage, which is something you will remember from the last video. We're making it deal cold damage, freeze enemies. And then these two basically proliferate one another. So you can get these off-screen explosions that look very, very nice. Now, for Herald of Thunder, one thing I will say, you can see I've got a level 21 gem. At level 21, you actually get another attack. You go from 3 to 4. So getting this at level 21 is really, really nice. A decent way to do this, depending on how expensive level 20 gems are, is to get a level 19 gem, link it up, and then corrupt it, and then use Lightning Mastery. Otherwise, just buy a level 20 gem, or just don't bother at all. Like, the extra attack, it's not, like, mandatory by any means, but it's nice to have to get your Herald of Thunder to level 21. And that'll be that for Flicker. Not much more to go over. The builder, obviously, as usual, will be pinned in the description and the comments. I'll make sure it's there for you. All the gears here, as well as I'm going to make a builder for the Pinnacle boss setup. It's something I haven't done yet, but it's basically just a few gem swaps, but I'll put it in there anyway. Yep. Okay, so if you're just here for the Flicker, that is, you guys leave and let the other guys in. Come on in if you're here for the Falling Thunder. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to sit on the planner as my gear is obviously set up for Flicker. And let's talk about changes that I've made. So if you weren't watching the previous, we have opted to include elemental damage to attacks on our weapon. And the reason for that is we have a ton of flat from our gloves and rings, which is very, very good. But it does mean that we're diluting the amount of flat damage we have, and it really makes percentage damage much more valuable. So getting wed on our weapon is very big. Also, if we can get crit damage bonus huge for the build, as it is multiplicative on weapon, and the Falling Thunder build is much easier to get to that 50% crit rate as we use ambush, right? Same as before. The only other thing that changed adds here is disdain. If obviously you wouldn't have seen from the flicker bit, but it gives us an absolute ton of ES. It more than doubles our ES. It gives us an extra power charge. It gives us damage taken bypasses energy shield, which we can more than deal with cannibalism. And the other thing that we've added in is blink. So blink, you need an unset ring to get an extra thing. You also need enough spirit to run the additional aura. It does cost 60 spirit. It does also mean we drop ghost dance if you're following the previous planner. But honestly, being able to dash around is so cozy on an otherwise slow build, especially Falling Thunder. Flicker at least zips around, but Falling Thunder, you will really are limited by your move speed. So being able to blink around, blink over walls, blink over those annoying terrain, very, very nice. Nothing else has really changed in terms of the gear for this. You still want to run Serpent's Egg on Falling Thunder, in my opinion. It just makes the build feel so much better. But the rest, not much change. One thing we will go over, if you've not seen it, the Herald of Ice tech, we are making our Herald of Ice deal lightning damage. We want it to shock enemies, and we want it to proc Innovate. And the reason we want that to happen is because Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder can actually proliferate one another. So then we get Herald of Thunder to do cold damage and kind of freeze and proc Ice Spite, and then obviously they just chain each other and you'll get these off-screen explosions, which is very, very good. Big changes on the tree for Falling Thunder. We added in a controlled metamorphosis jewel. This is going to play hell with your resistances, so be careful adding this in. If you can't add it in yet, you're just going to have to wait till you have better gear so you can actually fit it. But it does save us a lot of points that we can spend very well on Falling Thunder. You can see these nodes right here are an absolute steal, giving us 50% increased critical strike chance against enemies on full life. You guys should know more than well that we have a lot of synergies going on with hitting enemies on full life with this build, given we're off-screen anything with Falling Thunder. Also, 80% increased damage too, as well as 40% increased crit damage, 40% increased crit damage, 20% increased damage with hits against. These nodes are just crazy for the way that we've set this build up. So off-screen and everything is just going to get obliterated. And then Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder are going to boom, 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 pop everything off. Huge for the build. And then we're coming up and grabbing Kite Runner for movement speed, projectile speed. Projectile speed just makes this build feel so much better. The projectiles firing off everywhere. We did obviously lose the skill speed and the move speed down here, but it is what it is. I did end up having to drop a jewel slot on this build, so we no longer have the rage. But honestly, on Falling Thunder, you weren't really building it anyway because you don't get it from the projectile hit of Falling Thunder, so it's not the end of the world. And then on single target, you've still got rage on your Tempest Flurry, so you're still going to get the rage to use rage forwards on the bell and then build your rage back up so that you can deal more damage to the boss. And that is just about everything I think I've got to go over in terms of the updates to both builds. I'm very happy with how these turned out. They're both probably going to get nerfed in some way, not directly, indirectly due to Herald of Ice changes, Herald of Thunder changes. But if that happens, be rest assured I will find a way to make, I will continue to support these skills and the monk and the quarterstaffs in general, as this is the archetype that I really enjoy in this game. I'm currently trying to craft, as I say, like a really, really good quarterstaff, hopefully like mirror-ish tier. We do not have the best base, but this was the best base on the market. I couldn't find one with a higher fizz percentage, so I do have the best prefix base that I could find. Maybe one exists that someone else is crafting. But yeah, hoping to get this finished. It's going to be very, very expensive though. But yeah, fun stuff. Enjoying the early access. I do have Torchlight coming up on the 9th, which is, God, it's so close now. 10 days until Torchlight. So if you haven't played Torchlight Infinite before, that is the game that I play alongside PoE. If you're new to ARPGs or you're kind of getting finished off with PoE, at least for a little bit while the new content comes, then give Torchlight a try. We'll be doing some videos as it approaches. There'll be a reveal on the 4th, and we'll talk about all that then. So this was a long video by my standards, so I appreciate anyone that stayed to this point to listen. And thank you very much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.